"Your ID is invalid," she snapped, flicking it into the bushes like a spent cigarette. Then she turned and barked into her phone, "Yes, 911. I have a suspicious male claiming he owns a house here. No, he won't leave." I smiled because she didn't know who I was. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was also the lead project engineer on her entire development. And the call I made after hers was to revoke the permits on her $3 million modern farmhouse before her HOA brunch even started. "My name's Jordan Vexler, 42, civil engineer, contractor, and quiet type. I design residential neighborhoods for a living, layout, utilities, infrastructure, the works. After 20 years in the business, I've seen every type of development, from luxury estates to starter home communities. As a perk of my latest project, Granite Wreath Estates, I secured a home in Phase 1. Clean lines, minimal HOA nonsense, or so I was told, and peace at last after years of apartment living. The neighborhood was my masterpiece. Curved streets that followed the natural topography, underground utilities, and stormwater management that could handle a 100-year flood. I'd spent 18 months designing every pipe, every drainage swale, every utility easement. That lasted 2 weeks until Mara Yates, HOA president, spotted me watering my garden in cargo shorts and deemed me non-compliant. She was in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of rigid posture that screamed middle management. Her daily uniform consisted of pressed khakis, polo shirts with a Granite Wreath logo, and a clipboard she wielded like a weapon. She never asked who I was. She just assumed I didn't belong. See, Mara had very specific ideas about what a resident should look like, and apparently, a guy in work clothes didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. The first time we met, she marched across my lawn, trampling the new sod I'd just installed, to inform me that my mailbox was 2 inches too far from the curb. Regulation 4-7 clearly states mailboxes must be positioned exactly 18 inches from the street edge, she announced, consulting her clipboard with the intensity of someone reading nuclear launch codes. I pointed out that the mailbox was installed by the Postal Service according to their specifications, which supersede HOA rules. She stared at me like I'd suggested we sacrifice a goat. Mara began her paper campaign swiftly. She cited me for overwatering Zone 3 flora, apparently unaware that I had designed the entire irrigation system and knew exactly how much water each zone required. She reported me for using non-regulation mulch, despite the fact that I'd used the exact same cedar chip specified in the landscaping guidelines. She claimed I lacked visible resident credentials, whatever that meant. When I tried to explain I literally designed the drainage system she was standing on, she said with a dismissive tone, "So you built the flooding, too." This was rich, considering the neighborhood had never experienced so much as a puddle, thanks to my engineering. But Mara had a talent for turning facts into accusations. She began inspecting my property while I was at work, documenting every minor deviation from her personal interpretation of the rules. One neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, said she was seen holding a flashlight up to my security camera like it was some kind of threat. Another resident mentioned that Mara had been asking questions about me, wondering if I was really the homeowner or just house-sitting for someone more appropriate. The harassment escalated when she started leaving violation notices on my door almost daily: grass too long, garbage can visible from the street for 30 seconds too long, car parked in the driveway instead of the garage. Each citation came with a fine ranging from $25 to $200 and threats of legal action if I didn't comply immediately. I began documenting everything, taking photos of her trespassing, recording her confrontations with other residents who dared to question her authority. Then one morning, as I returned from a jog, she stopped me at my own door. She was standing there with 2 other HOA board members, arms crossed, blocking my path like some kind of suburban security checkpoint. "I need to see your identification and proof of residency," she demanded, her voice sharp with authority. I showed her my ID, explaining calmly that I lived there and had every right to be on my own property. She examined it like a bouncer checking a fake, then declared it invalid because the address didn't match her records. She threw it and called the cops. Yes, 911, she said, speaking loudly enough for the gathering crowd of neighbors to hear. I have a suspicious male claiming he owns a house here. He's become aggressive when asked for proper identification. No, he won't leave. I'm the HOA president, and I'm telling you, this man doesn't belong here. I watched my driver's license disappear into the landscaping while she painted me as some kind of dangerous intruder. 2 officers arrived within minutes, and I could see Mara's satisfied smirk as they approached. She immediately launched into her story about how I'd been causing problems, violating rules, and now trespassing on property where I didn't belong. The officers listened patiently, then asked to see my identification. I calmly showed them my driver's license, deed, and then pulled out something that made Mara's face go white, the blueprints with my name on every single utility line in the neighborhood. Officer Henderson, the older of the 2, spread the plans across the hood of his patrol car. Jordan Vexler, licensed professional engineer, he read aloud. These are the original development plans for Granite Wreath Estates. Mara stood there fuming, demanding they remove the trespasser, insisting the documents were fake. The cops laughed. Officer Henderson recognized me from a zoning meeting 6 months earlier. Wait, aren't you the guy who designed the sewer grid? He asked. Yep, I said. And the storm drains, and the water mains, and pretty much everything else you're standing on. The color drained from Mara's face as the reality sunk in. She'd been harassing the guy who literally built her neighborhood. But I wasn't done. I made my call to the developer, my firm's legal team, because Mara's house was part of Phase 3, and nothing in Phase 3 had closed yet. Every permit, every approval, every utility connection had to go through me or my team. And someone who assaults residents and calls false police reports. Well, that creates liability issues. Within 48 hours, her entire build was frozen. Code violations that hadn't existed the day before suddenly appeared, drainage reevaluation needed, utility access pending review, environmental impact assessment required. The HOA board scrambled, suddenly realizing their president had picked a fight with the wrong person. Emergency meetings were called. Lawyers were consulted. Panic set in when they discovered the extent of Mara's unauthorized actions. Turns out, Mara had been using HOA funds to expedite her own lot approval without informing anyone. She'd paid for rush permits, priority inspections, and even hired a private surveyor to fast-track her foundation work, all of it paid for with money that was supposed to maintain common areas and fund community improvements. The financial records showed over $15,000 in questionable expenses, all tied to her personal construction project. I brought that to light in a private meeting with the developer, who responded with barely controlled anger, "Oh, she's done." The next day, her builder packed up. Porta potty gone. Cement truck ghosted. Construction equipment vanished overnight. Mara showed up to an empty lot with a garden hose spraying into a trench and screamed at the mud like it was personally responsible for her problems. The HOA board held an emergency session that night. Mara was officially removed as HOA president by a unanimous vote, with her own second-in-command calling for her immediate resignation. The homeowners were notified of her misuse of funds, her interference with construction permits, and her assault by ID fling. The development's legal team filed a permanent bar on her from holding any HOA or architectural control position again. Her $3 million dream home. Cancelled, relist. The model now bears a different name, the Vexler. And yes, it's got visible credentials in brushed aluminum. But the consequences didn't stop there. The state licensing board opened an investigation into her real estate license after learning about her misuse of HOA funds. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and filed charges for theft of services and filing a false police report. Mara faced up to 2 years in prison and $25,000 in fines. When the judge read the sentence, 18 months probation, community service, and full restitution to the HOA, she stood there in the courtroom, mouth agape, finally understanding that her little power trip had cost her everything.